And we have learned in international politics that the state is there to maximize power. And I have seen this, because once you share with the state a little bit of power, which is in this case the power of your reporting, your camera, your influence over your audience, immediately you are spotted by the state as a threat. And in this case, the state starts to either buy your voice, use your pen, utilize your camera, or silence you, either with us or against us. There is no in between. This is the true essence of journalism, the battle between journalism and centers of power. Unfortunately, I have seen this in every single Arab state almost across the region. I have seen it in the third world, I have seen it in Africa, I have seen it in many parts of the world, including international powers, like the Americans and later on the British and all those who participated in the war against Iraq. So, when I became the Director General or the Managing Director of Al Jazeera Arabic at that time, really we were in front of a huge threat. The threat of the American and regional pressure on us. And the Americans were by then realizing that they are losing the war in Iraq. This is by the end of 2003, beginning of 2004. They are losing. New resistance is emerging, and they are under heavy threat, and they could not believe it. I remember one day, let me tell you a story. I was invited, or a guy who was the commander of the American army in Iraq decided to come engage in discussion with Al Jazeera staff in our bureau. And he came with his guys, and we had a table like this sitting around the table. He told me, Mr. Khanfar, can you tell me how come that the Iraqis, who we have brought to them democracy, and $14 billion. By the way, $14 billion later on were stolen. Anyway, we don't know where they spent it, but they said $14 billion. I remember the $14 billion because for the American, military, $14 billion count, and they think that by having these $14 billion, you can buy allegiance of the people. So that he said, we are spending $14 billion and we are liberating the country from the tyranny of Saddam Hussein, and look at them. They are fighting us. They are supporting someone who worth nothing. Al-Zarqawi. Abu Mus'ab al-Zarqawi, the chief of what turned to become later on Al-Qaeda branch in Iraq, in Baghdad. So how come they are doing so? So I started explaining to the gentleman that there is something called history, and there is something called dignity, and there is something called occupation that contradicts human dignity and human civilization and human belonging. So therefore, it is not an issue of money, which we should speak about. It's an issue of the insult that you, through occupying the land, have directed against people who believe that they are, they belong to a great civilization. After a long discussion, he told me the following two statements. He said, Mr. Khanfar, I acknowledge what you say, but I cannot understand it. Simply. Because, maybe for someone like that, he really cannot understand. What do you mean history? What is the actual meaning of dignity? What nonsense are you talking about? So I realized also again, there is another challenge. To what extent we in journalism could understand the essence and the collective mind of a nation. Because without understanding the collective mind of every nation, you cannot report or interpret or understand events in that region. That's also important. And I have found that every nation has collective mind, different from other nations, although they share other values. But there are certain kind of distinctions that you should search for in order to understand that particular nation. And you can never be, or you should not be arrogant enough to ignore these kind of specificities in every nation. And you should not be judgmental as well towards them. If you would like to be a great reporter, then you don't have to be judgmental by saying this nation is wrong or right. It is not an issue of wrong or right. It's an issue, can you really understand from where this nation has come and what this nation believes? This is when you start actually your profession on sound foundations, believing in the diversity and utilizing your knowledge about it in order to decide on a paradigm of analysis for events. Then that paradigm of analysis becomes also a paradigm of interpreting events and forecasting even what's going to happen. Without this knowledge, you will fail, politicians will fail, military will fail, and the Americans failed in Iraq, militarily, politically, and culturally. They could not understand the collective mind of the Iraqis or the Afghans, and they failed dismally. They came from a superior background, thinking that their superior background is universally implemented everywhere they go. They were shocked that there are nations who believe that they have their own civilization and culture, and they don't really need the American, civilization, or the American, let us say, prism regarding the universe. So they were shocked, and they regard that something outside the logic and norm. In journalism, we need to also again believe about this diversity. Going back to politics, when I came back to Al Jazeera in 2003, by the end of 2003, that was the major challenge. We found that Mr. George Bush was actually planning to hit and destroy our headquarters in Doha this time. And that was the discussion that took place between George Bush and Tony Blair. In 2004, that was the major story that we did cover. It was leaked to us by some good people inside 10 Downing Street, who have seen a memorandum, and they decided that this is too bad to be hidden, so they leaked it to the Daily Mirror, and from the Daily Mirror, of course, we picked it up, and it became something that the international media started talking about. It was leaked from 10 Downing Street. The gentleman who leaked it was sent to the court because he did leak a confidential or secret memo. We had to support him and stand for him as journalists, because I do believe that once the sources of information are blocked by the state, it means that the state most likely is doing something wrong, and they don't want you to know about it. So whoever leaks these kind of documents, we have a moral responsibility to support and to stand for. I don't believe that state that has much secrets is a state that is worthy of good governance. And this is again an area which we need always to speak about. WikiLeaks was another example of how things actually went in a moment of time. And we had in Al Jazeera our own experience when we did publish the secret memos of negotiations between the Palestinians and the Israelis by the beginning of 2011, what we call Palestine Papers. And Palestine Papers were leaked to us by someone working within the Palestinian negotiations team, who was entrusted on the minutes, the actual minutes of daily negotiations for 10 years between the Israelis and the Palestinians. And that gentleman, he was overwhelmed by the importance of these documents and the amount of secrecy within it that contradicts the Palestinian national aspirations. And in a moment of time, he decided that he cannot live with this kind of heavy burden on his shoulders. This is a historical responsibility that he is witnessing. He cannot live with it. So he went to us and he said, guys, take this. When I read a few thousand pages actually of negotiations, I was alarmed by the amount of secrecy that was deliberately put aside from the Palestinian people. And the amount of knowledge in these documents and what it tells you about the psychology of negotiations taking place is great. To an extent that for the sake of the truth and Palestine and the negotiations and peace, people should know about it. So immediately we ordered that it should be translated from English into Arabic, and after 6 months of a lot of work from a special team that was designated in order to work on these documents, we were able to publish it to the world in coordination with The Guardian at that time. And it was shocking for everyone who was monitoring the Palestinian negotiations, Palestinian-Israeli negotiations, to read the real truth about it. Why did states hide what was happening? Because something was wrong. Why did they go crazy when we published them? accusing Al Jazeera of all kinds of accusations, because they were doing something they didn't want the people to know about it. So simple logic. If you are negotiating that conflict in a good spirit, why don't you want people to know about the issues that you are negotiating about? Because you were doing something thinking that you can, with time, do and achieve without knowledge of the public. And in my opinion, that is bad governance, that is bad politics. This is a conspiracy against people, and this is a conspiracy against the truth. We have a responsibility as journalists to celebrate whoever is in fact providing us, or every source that is endangering sometimes his career, sometimes their lives, in order to put the truth in front of the people. I wish if states could realize to what extent they could build healthy societies by allowing transparency, by allowing people to know the real truth about what they do. I wish politicians could appreciate how could they become national heroes if they are really serving the public and they have less secrets to go public about it. I wish that politics changes from, pragmatism of gaining certain kind of interests, immediate interest for the sake of the party or the sake of the person on top or the sake of particular group, for the sake of creating healthy society through exchanging information with everyone. And that is our role. Colleagues, we are there not to achieve fame. And we are here in this profession not to be wealthy. And we are here not actually to feel that we are powerful. We are here to act as agents for our people and agents for the truth. That could, in a moment of time, mean that we are endangering our actual presence, our existence, or our profession, our job in a way, in a monetary way, or our relationships, sometimes with centers of power. But definitely, whoever believes that journalism is a short path towards wealth and fame, he is in the wrong place. He is not going to be an agent for truth. He is going to be an agent for the authority. He is going to serve centers of power, because always he will keep in mind to what extent this profession will bring him personally particular interests. The great journalists that all of us remember and celebrate in the world are those who dedicated their time and effort for the people, for locating human being at the center of their editorial policy, not powers, not commercial interest at the center of their editorial policy. We tried that in Al Jazeera, and we faced, because of that, a lot of attack from political actors in the region. Governments put us in jail. Almost every single government in the Arab world imprisoned in a moment of time a correspondent or a bureau chief or a cameraman or someone belongs to Al Jazeera. Almost every single government in the region did shut down Al Jazeera bureau in a moment of time. But later on they will reopen it again because of certain circumstances. It is a game, a huge game. But the most important thing, not to lose in the fight against centers of power, not to lose the fact that you are entrusted on the truth and entrusted with the mind of the public, and you can never betray them, regardless of what consequences you are going to face. If you cannot really live up to the expectation, leave. You don't have to continue. But the worst form of journalism is journalism that deceives the public. Journalism that is there to cover up or to frame a story or to utilize our technology for the sake of empowering centers of power in the wrong direction.